started since everyone's here and ready to go. Thank you for being here and ready to go. I'm Connor Lamb, ready to call to order the State of the Steel hearing for 2019. So appreciate everybody being here. I will just make a quick opening statement and then recognize our co-chairs here for the same thing. This was actually the first thing I did as a newly elected member of Congress last year. Before I was even sworn in, I came down and had a chance to sit in. And it's interesting looking back on that now a year later because I think some things have changed and some things haven't, and I hope that we hear a little bit about that today. It seems to me like the state of the industry may be stronger today than it was 1 year ago due to a few things that have taken place. I think one thing that it seems that we all agree on is that what was happening in the past is intolerable. We've had Chinese overcapacity and has eroded our industrial base. And in my view, it has weakened our ability to do three things that were always extremely important to Western Pennsylvania, but I also think the country as a whole, which was to contribute to the national defense, to build world-class infrastructure, but more importantly, to build a base of jobs that could actually sustain working families and middle-class families over a long period. And we did that very successfully in World War II and afterward, and I think because of Chinese overcapacity and some other factors, we lost that along the way. And so I think we all know that we need to fix that. We've had a little bit of experience trying something new here in the last year or two, and I hope we can hear about how that has gone, and more importantly, where we're going to go in the long term in the future. So those are the things I hope we can address today. I want to make sure that we get to talk about infrastructure in addition to the issues around 232. I know that has a tendency to grab everyone's attention, but infrastructure really is an issue that I think we all need to stay focused on. It's something that thankfully both parties have said they're interested in working on, but we have to fight a little bit to keep it at the top of the agenda. And every year that goes by, in my opinion, we are losing an opportunity to make investments that can pay off for a really long time, and I think can be very good for your industry as well. So that's all I wanted to say, and with that, I will recognize both of the vice chairs and co-chairs this morning for their opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. And last year, if you remember, I said this was probably one of the most important, if not the most important, State of the Steel industry hearings we'd had, and for the reasons that Connor outlined. But today I'm wondering if maybe this year is not the most important one. And you know, we say that all the time, but let me just say thank you for being here, and to all the members of the steel industry who've made being here a priority. Thanks for contributing your valuable perspective. I'll keep my comments short so we can just give our witnesses time to help us understand how we can better assist them and their employees. The last 2 years have been quite active for the steel industry. This time last year, waiting for Section 232 investigation to finish. Since then, we watched the President act to protect the U.S. steel industry, and all of you here have enjoyed the benefits of that action. Imports are down, your production is high, and many have been able to expand their businesses. In the midst of this significant improvement to the steel industry, we've realized these gains in areas like in my district, where employment has grown even more than the jobs open more than our ability to fill them, and that's a good problem to have. I hope we can continue on that trajectory and improve and see the steel industry flourish across the country. I have the frequent opportunity to visit with many of you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some new folks in the industry. Most importantly, I want to know how we as leaders of the Steel Caucus can continue to be your advocates here in Congress and with the administration to ensure our companies get a fair shake here in America and on the international stage. We have some of the best steel and steel products being produced in all of America in my district, and I'm sure my colleagues would say the same thing about their districts. And I want to thank you again for being here today. With that, I yield back.
First, I want to say thank you, Chairman, thank you, Rick, and thank you for being here. My comments are going to be real brief so that we can go ahead and hear you as the witnesses as soon as we can. Steel is a critical industry in American economy and national security, but it's an industry that recently has went through a very severe crisis. Foreign steel competitors have distorted the market by flooding it with unfair traded steel. Many of these products are produced by non-market economies that produce and sell below fair market value. While China is the worst offender, many other nations, including close U.S. allies, are also engaging in unfair trade practices. At this time, the United States has imposed more than 26 AD and CVD duties on unfair trade foreign steel imports. The President's decision to invoke 232 has provided a critical lifeline. Look no further than my own district, where operations at the Granite City Works led to the return of 800 jobs. Section 232 is about ensuring the United States has the domestic capacity to produce steel to meet our defense and economic security needs. Allies are important, but they are no substitute for having our domestic capacity. This is about American security, it's about American steel, and it's about American jobs. We're starting to see real results for real people. And I know that every day whenever I go and see the people in Granite City. Not only the people that are working in the plant, but the people that are benefiting from the spin-off jobs that are occurring. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll proceed with introducing our witnesses, starting with Mr. Crawford introducing Mr. Ferriola from Nucor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to introduce CEO and President of Nucor Corporation, John Ferriola. Mr. Ferriola is also the Vice Chairman of the American Iron and Steel Institute. He started with Nucor in 1991 and became CEO and President in January 2013. When I was first elected, Nucor was one of the largest companies in my district, and since then they've continued to grow by being one of the most innovative steel makers in the country, not only in processing and manufacturing, but also in workforce development and strategic thinking that positions them as one of the top steel producing companies in the country. Mr. Ferriola, welcome and thank you for being here.
And I am proud to have the opportunity to introduce Leo Gerard, the International President of the United Steelworkers, the largest and most diverse industrial union in North America. It's the dominant union in paper, forestry products, steel, aluminum, tire, rubber, glass, chemicals, and petroleum. And under President Gerard's direction, the 850,000 member USW has sharpened its focus on trade policy and reversing the alarming decline of manufacturing in the United States. President Gerard has led campaigns against unfairly traded imports, often testifying before congressional subcommittees that handle issues related to trade and industry. And I can speak personally that the first time I've met with President Gerard and every time since then, the number one issue on his agenda has always been to talk about the cooperative efforts he has made along with industry to prosecute these trade cases and try to deal with the overcapacity that we've seen. President Gerard was the second Canadian to head the USW and serves on the AFL-CIO's executive committee. He is the co-founder of the Blue-Green Alliance, a national partnership of labor unions and environmental organizations that's dedicated to expanding the number and quality of jobs in the green economy. Welcome, President Gerard.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I would like to take this time to introduce David Burt. David is President and CEO of U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel is the nation's largest United States headquartered integrated steel producer. As an integrated producer, U.S. Steel has more than 15 operations throughout the United States that mine ore and produce finished steel. One of these is located in my district, that's U.S. Granite City Steel Works. Mr. Burt joined U.S. Steel in 2013 and became CEO in 2017. His ties to Illinois run deep. Prior to joining U.S. Steel, he served as Chief Financial for Caterpillar Incorporated, which is headquartered in Peoria. He also received his bachelor's degree from Bradley University, which is in Peoria, which is a little bothersome for me, but that's because I'm at SIU, and we like to beat them in basketball as often as we can. And his master's in business administration was from the University of Illinois in Champaign. Mr. Burt, thank you for being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. Thanks for having me.
And I am proud to also welcome John Brett, who serves as Vice President of ArcelorMittal and President and CEO of ArcelorMittal USA. He has oversight of 16 facilities in 9 states, including mine, integrated steelmaking facilities and finishing mills capable of producing light, flat rolled, and plate products. ArcelorMittal USA operations employ more than 18,000 people and serve as a vital component of the company's global footprint. Mr. Brett joined the predecessor company Inland Steel in 1988 as an associate accountant and has worked his way up and held various leadership positions in accounting, finance, and supply chain management. He is a magna cum laude graduate of DePaul University, majoring in economics. He also earned an MBA in finance and accounting from the University of Chicago and lives in Schererville, Indiana with his wife and daughter, and is an avid sports enthusiast and I'm sure at least a somewhat sympathetic Pittsburgh Steelers fan, given his industry and their location in Western Pennsylvania. Thank you, Mr. Brett.
Our next witness is Ms. Barbara Smith, President and CEO of Commercial Metals. Commercial Metals is headquartered in Irving, Texas. Ms. Smith has served in her current capacity as President and CEO since 2017. She has also held executive positions with Amber Steel in Orlando, Florida. Overall, she has more than 2 decades of experience in domestic steel industry. She is testifying today on behalf of the Steel Manufacturers Association. Ms. Smith, we thank you and we look forward to your testimony.
I'm pleased to introduce Tony Forbata from Zeppelin Atlas II. Mr. Forbata is a native of the Chicago area and has been in the steel industry for most of his career. He received his bachelor's degree in accounting from University of Illinois, Chicago. He currently is the Vice President of Finance for Zeppelin and has served in various roles during his 28-year tenure with the company, including finance operations, M&A, and government relations. He also serves as the chairman of the Committee on Pipe and Tube Imports. I'm proud to have Zeppelin Atlas Tube in my district, which makes structural tubing used in construction and infrastructure markets. Mr. Forbata, thank you for being here.
Okay, with that, if we could begin the witness testimony, starting with Mr. Ferriola.
Good morning. Chairman Lamb, Vice Chairman Crawford, and Vice Chairman Boss. On behalf of our 26,000 teammates, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm John Ferriola, Chairman, CEO, and President of Nucor Corporation. Nucor is the largest steel producer in the United States and North America's largest recycler. 2018 was a tremendous year for Nucor. We posted our highest earnings in the company's history and also set records for revenue generated and tons of steel shipped. Our record performance was fueled by the strong U.S. economy, which posted its best fourth quarter to fourth quarter growth since 2005 and drove steel demand higher. Tax reform and regulatory relief took a good economy at the end of 2017 and made it even better. Section 232 steel tariffs also played an important role by helping provide a level playing field for the steel industry. And the tariffs are working. Steel imports are down by more than 4 million tons last year, with 90% of the decrease taking place after the tariffs were fully implemented. Lower imports and increased demand led to higher U.S. capacity utilization and 5 to 6 million tons of additional steel production in the United States. Well, there's been a lot of debate in Washington and in the press about tariffs. People around the country and in our industrial communities know that the president got it right. They know other countries have been cheating and that a healthy steel industry is vital for our national security. Doomsday predictions about the tariffs have simply failed to materialize. Just look at the statistics. Last year was one of the best years ever for manufacturing. Profits for the sector were the highest they have been in the last 20 years. Manufacturing had its biggest net gain in jobs since 1997. Blue-collar wages are up and unemployment is at a 50-year low. A level playing field and a strong economy are directly benefiting our Nucor teammates' wallets because a significant percentage of our teammates' compensation is based on how many tons, quality tons, they produce safely. Our record steel shipments last year meant that our teammates took home bigger paychecks. On top of that, our teammates' profit-sharing checks totaled a record $308 million. And in recognition of our record year last year and the tremendous contribution of our team in achieving that record, every one of our teammates, except for the executive team, received an extraordinary bonus check of $2,000. We believe 2019 will be another good year. 23 of the 24 end markets we monitor are stable or growing, with several at the very beginning of their upcycle. Our optimism is reflected in the capital investments we're making here in America. Nucor has announced 10 growth projects, including 3 new steel mills, that represent a total capital investment of approximately $3.5 billion. These projects will begin operations over the next 3 years, creating nearly 1,600 direct jobs and at least another 18,000 indirect jobs. This year alone, 6 of these projects are coming online, including a new rebar micro mill in Missouri, a galvanizing line at our Kentucky sheet mill, a specialty cold mill in Arkansas, an upgraded rolling mill in Ohio, and our merchant bar expansion in Illinois. The benefits of a healthy steel industry extend well beyond our company and our teammates. The true impact can be seen in the communities where we operate. Our teammates actively volunteer in their communities, raising money for local children's hospitals, food banks, and schools, serving on boards of community organizations, and building wounded warrior housing for disabled veterans. We appreciate the support and leadership of the Congressional Steel Caucus. You've heard me argue that we can compete successfully with any company in the world, any country in the world, if we have a level playing field. And today, we are proving just that. We look forward to continuing our work together so that our investments are sustainable for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. President Gerard.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lamb, Vice Chair Post, and Crawford. And again, I thank you for holding this meeting. In fact, it feels a little bit like Old Home Week. We've been here so often. I may be the skunk at the garden party. Right now, the steel industry is in what I would call recovery, and that times are better than they've been for some time. But let me remind you that this industry has been under constant attack. In fact, when President Clinton left office that many years ago, he issued a statement that said we should pursue a 2001, a 201, because the American steel industry had been under unfair attack for 30 years. That was when Bill Clinton left office. The fact of the matter is that 232 tariffs have had a positive impact on production, employment, and investment in America. The administration recognized, as every American has long known, that steel is the backbone of the economy. You can't make anything if you don't make steel. And that economics and provided economic security. We've seen the return of literally thousands of jobs. We've seen a return in people having some sense of stability and looking forward to their future. And the industry has recaptured a significant part of the economy, as John just said. Equally important is that more than 31,000 of our members managed through collective bargaining in the last round of bargaining to get very good collective agreements and very good settlements and very good profit sharing chunks that we've been able to bargain. But let me just say this, Chinese overcapacity still exists. Chinese overcapacity is actually the sword hanging over our head, and we can't ignore it. The 232 tariffs must be coupled with renewed efforts to reach bilateral disciplines on overcapacity, largely, as I said, fueled by China, which has the highest production levels ever. I'm going to say this again. They have the highest production levels ever last October. And we fundamentally believe that the next round, they'll have even more domestic overcapacity, so that we can't sit idly by and think that because things appear to be good, that they're going to be good forever. We've got to make the recognition that the cheaters still exist. Those countries that don't play by the rules still exist. And if there is a slight downturn, they'll be ready to swallow us up. So it's important that this Congressional Steel Caucus continue to be our allies. I would just say to President Burritt that we go way back where the steel industry and the Congressional Steel Caucus were in fact our lifeline. The things that we did, and Mike Doyle's been around long enough that he'll remember that. So that if the times are a little bit better, we shouldn't assume that they're going to stay that way forever. And I applaud the industry for investing in modernizing and taking the opportunity to grow their business. But we can't turn our back on what's happening from those countries that are cheaters. And they continue to be cheaters. The other thing that I think is something that the Congressional Steel Caucus can help us with is that under the rules of the 232, countries get to ask for a waiver on certain products. Something that the Steel Caucus could help us with is reviewing those waivers. China has received 40% of all waivers. China last quarter hit record trade deficit with America. So that, as I say, their domestic overcapacity and their continuous request for waivers for over 40% granted are a challenge that we all have to meet. So in addition to the oversupply, we've also going to have the declining market opportunities as a problem as steel consuming industries move out of the country, whether it's to China or Mexico. Then we have to chase demand. Demand is also diminished, as I said, by slow housing market as well as companies that use their windfall tax break to promote stock buybacks and increase dividends to the tune of almost $1 trillion. Rather than investing in new plant and equipment, as an example, GM has spent $10 billion in stock buybacks, double the so-called savings the company will realize from kicking thousands of workers onto the unemployment line. That concerns our union. As John said, that manufacturing is growing. But while manufacturing is growing, we got to realize that those countries that were the cheaters that are now being slightly held back, if the economy starts to decline, they'll pounce on us. And the Congressional Steel Caucus has a role to play there. That we have always supported tariffs. In fact, we've gone to the International Trade Commission more times than I can count. But we never ask for tariffs on those countries that don't cheat. And we have 200,000 members in Canada that don't cheat. And so that we want tariffs on those countries that cheat. We think it's important for the Congressional Steel Caucus to not be loyal into a sense of comfort because we're doing well. We've done well before. And when the opportunity came for those countries that cheat, they did it. And they cost us not only thousands of jobs, but I can remember in the last downturn, major downturn, we had more than 40 bankruptcies. We had those 40 bankruptcies in many ways because neither the industry or the workers anticipated it to be that tough. So that those are the things that we concern about. And we also hope that the Congressional Steel Caucus can become a very, very strong advocate for rebuilding our infrastructure, modernizing our schools, modernizing our water treatment plants, and creating demand here in America. For a period of time, a number of naysayers would say that the U.S. steel industry couldn't meet the demand if it was there. That's just baloney. The American steel industry can meet whatever demand is there. And a number that I've thrown around for quite a while and no one's been disputing it. There was a time when we did about 135 million tons domestic steel industry. When we were last here, we were down to 85 million tons. And we took a position, if this doesn't stop, what will happen next? You can't have a strong industrial economy unless you have a strong, vibrant, and growing steel industry. And the Congressional Steel Caucus has been very helpful in that regard. The other thing that I think we need to be concerned about is what's going to happen with NAFTA 0.20. If we end up with a NAFTA deal that has no enforcement mechanisms, and currently the deal being pushed does not have enforcement mechanisms. If we don't have strong enforcement mechanisms that Mexico has to modernize its labor boards so that they have real unions that can do real bargaining. If they don't move away from their low-wage model of running the economy, the steel industry can't pick up and move to Monterrey. Others can build a steel plant in Monterrey to chase the downward slide that would go on in the industry if we don't remodernize our infrastructure. So unless we could spend at least $100 million a year for the next 10 years, the American infrastructure will continue to deteriorate. The American infrastructure needs the steel industry, and the steel industry needs a modern infrastructure. So that's another important component of, and I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party. We're pleased that things are going good, but our union has a long history. I once found an article written by IWA, well, someone nobody here would know, but he was the original president of our union after Phil Murray. And in 1967, Abe wrote in an article, unless they do something, the American steel industry will be destroyed. Imports are at 7%. He had a vision and he knew what was coming. So that collectively you, the Congressional Steel Caucus, have often been our lifeline. You now have an opportunity to, with a growing and strong steel industry, be very aggressive on needing to modernize our infrastructure, to do that with steel that's made by our members, and to do that with steel that is of the best quality. And I'll close my comments by saying you all ought to go and see what happened at the Bay Bridge from Oakland to San Francisco. They used Chinese steel, double the price because they couldn't hold the weld. They had to send American engineers across to figure out how to do this. And during that period of time, they blew $6 billion that didn't hold the weld because they used shitty Chinese steel. And I hear this is being broadcast, so it is shitty Chinese steel. So I'll end up with that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Gerard. Mr. Burke.
Tough act to follow. On behalf of the nearly 28,000 men and women of U.S. Steel, thank you for giving me. Hey, pull your microphone ahead. On behalf of the nearly 28,000 men and women of U.S. Steel, thank you for convening today's hearing. Your bipartisan leadership has proven critical to confronting the threats posed to the U.S. industry's long-term capacity to provide a strong foundation for our nation's economy, security, infrastructure, environment, energy independence, and manufacturing industries. Since the President signed the Section 232 National Security Action on Steel Imports, positive impacts occurred swiftly and continue today. Jobs are returning. Steel making capacity is reviving. The U.S. steel industry is able to innovate and invest to modernize our operations and strengthen our ability to supply America's demand for steel. The Section 232 is a success and must be kept strong. U.S. Steel is at the forefront of this renaissance. In Granite City, Illinois, 2 blast furnaces restarted and 800 jobs returned. In Gary, Indiana, we'll invest at least $750 million from a $2 billion revitalization of key steelmaking assets in the United States. In Texas, a tubular mill we thought was shuttered forever will be back this summer with 140 new workers. In Alabama, construction has resumed on a new electric arc furnace with 600 jobs to build it and 150 new full-time workers to operate it. In Ohio, a $400 million advanced high-strength steel production line will open this summer to supply automakers building more fuel-efficient cars, trucks, and SUVs. At each of our operating locations, we're hiring. At Pittsburgh's Mon Valley Works, for example, in 2018, we hired 400 new workers. A new 4-year agreement with 14% wage increases was negotiated with United Steelworkers. Non-represented employees received unprecedented performance awards and an expanded benefits package. Restarts, rehires, and reinvestments in our people and facilities are tremendously positive news, yet view this for what it is, a recovery. For years, deep damage has been inflicted by floods of foreign steel into our open market. Don't forget, it was just 2015 and 2016 when thousands of steelworkers were being laid off and American mills were being idled and even demolished. The U.S. steel industry is still vulnerable. Now is not the time to blink. The Section 232 must continue to be applied to all countries, especially the largest import sources, whether that's a tariff or a hard quota. Even our best allies can be conduits for foreign steel from China and elsewhere. If Section 232 doesn't apply everywhere, it's nowhere, as border leaks will continue from global excess capacity. No one should be lulled into thinking Section 232's job is done because the U.S. industry has touched 80% capacity utilization. This is not a temporary peak to be climbed, celebrated, and abandoned. It's a plateau to be sustained as the bare minimum necessary for the industry to survive and supply our country over the long term. As U.S. steelmaking recovers and rebuilds under Section 232, American manufacturing is thriving and the overall economy is growing. GDP grew at over 3% in 2018. The unemployment rate is low. Blue-collar jobs in mining, construction, and manufacturing are expanding. The Steel Section 232 is allowing the U.S. steel industry to stabilize, invest, innovate, and grow, which makes our country and economy stronger. Please don't blink. Continue to support the Steel Section 232 and the hardworking Americans mining, melting, and pouring steel in the USA to strengthen our national and economic security. We cannot permit our great nation to become dependent on foreign steel to defend, build, and power our country. We must continue to keep America steel strong.
Thank you. And Mr. Brett.
Good morning, Chairman Lamb, Co-Chairman Boston Crawford, and members of the caucus. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning on the state of the U.S. steel industry. Today, 1 year after President Trump announced he would use his national security authority to limit steel imports, ArcelorMittal USA is a stronger company. We just reported our best year financially since 2007. As a result, we've been able to increase our investments in our plants and our people. In 2018, ArcelorMittal invested more than $392 million on projects across our U.S. operations. Examples of these include installing walking beam furnaces at our Burns Harbor facility to support the delivery of quality substrate for automotive customers, upgrading the hot dip galvanizing line at ArcelorMittal Cleveland to enable production of new steels with increased formability and strength, ensuring consistent shape control to Indiana Harbor's No. 3 continuous annealing line, and improving AM&S Calver's coating and galvanizing lines to support production of third-generation advanced high-strength steels. In 2019, our CapEx budget will increase to approximately $460 million, our largest budget in recent memory. With these additional funds, we will continue to invest in strategic projects to expand our capabilities and improve efficiency. Meeting and exceeding our customers' expectations is the key to building a sustainable steel company of the future. Our stronger financial performance in 2018 certainly contributed to the 4-year labor agreement we reached with the United Steelworkers last fall. Under that contract, we agreed to pay each of our union employees a $4,000 bonus and pay increases between 3% and 4% annually over the next 4 years. We also committed to spend a minimum of $3.1 billion on our facilities over the life of this agreement. Looking ahead, I would like to say the outlook for 2019 is equally strong. In reality, demand for our steel products is expected to be steady at best. Although import market share for our products is the lowest since 2013, global overcapacity in steel continues to be a threat. If global steel demand softens, the U.S. market will be the destination of choice, as always, putting the investments and expansions underway in the United States at risk. Beyond trade actions that help level the playing field, there is one single act you could take to stimulate demand for steel and increase the competitiveness of American manufacturing. Pass a meaningful infrastructure package. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for raising this issue when you spoke at the recent AISI board meeting. As an integrated steel producer, ArcelorMittal USA transports iron and coke to our blast furnaces to make steel. We mine taconite in Minnesota's Iron Range, turn it into pellets, then move the pellets by rail to the port of Duluth, where they're loaded onto 1,000-foot ships which transit Michigan Soo locks for delivery to our blast furnaces in Indiana and Ohio. That raw iron meets up with coke that began life at our West Virginia coal mines, moved by rail or barge to our coke batteries in Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, and then onto our steel mills. Once produced, our steel moves by rail, truck, and water to our finishing operations and to our customers. Not only are these modes of transportation essential to our operations and our customers, but they're also steel intensive. Rail and rail cars, roads, bridges, and trucks, locks, dams and ships, pipelines, electrical generation, transmission and distribution all require significant amounts of steel to build and maintain. ArcelorMittal and other domestic steel companies and the steelworkers have testified before this caucus year after year about the importance of dealing with our nation's aging infrastructure. Please, let this year be the time to stop talking and start investing. In closing, I want to express our support for the newly renegotiated U.S.-Mexico-Canadian agreement. Millions of tons of ArcelorMittal steel made in the United States, Canada, and Mexico cross borders within the NAFTA region each year. We welcome the strengthened auto rules of origin, which should make sure North American steel continues to be the steel of choice for auto customers. I urge the Congress to approve the new agreement this year. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, and Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb, Vice Chairman Crawford, Vice Chairman Boss, for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm honored to appear before the Congressional Steel Caucus to provide perspectives on the state of the American steel industry and our policy priorities. As mentioned earlier, I'm Barbara Smith, Chairman of the Board, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Commercial Metals Company, a Fortune 1000 company that recycles, manufactures, and fabricates steel. CMC is a founding member of the Steel Manufacturers Association, SMA. SMA is celebrating 30 years as the voice for the nation's electric arc furnace steel producers, among the cleanest and most energy efficient steel producers in the world. The EAF sector accounts for nearly 70% of U.S. steel production, and steel manufactured by our mills routinely contains over 95% recycled content. CMC's state-of-the-art mills make high-quality steel products in the United States and Poland. We are headquartered in Texas. We have steel production facilities in 10 U.S. states, strategically located from California to New Jersey. In 2018, we were proud to begin production at our newest greenfield plant, a micromill in Durant, Oklahoma. I would mention that Commercial Metals pioneered this technology, building the first micromill in the world in Mesa, Arizona, which started production in 2009, at the height of the global financial crisis. We also completed the acquisition of 4 U.S. electric arc furnace steelmaking operations from a Brazilian headquartered company, ensuring 3,000 American workers and their families will continue to have high-quality jobs producing steels. As you've heard from previous speakers, the U.S. steel industry has suffered through a lost decade, with lost sales due to large volumes of subsidized imports, resulting in low capacity utilization, low margins, lost jobs, and reduced ability to reinvest for our future. Following the 2009 financial crisis and recession, relentless surges of steel imports made it difficult for the U.S. industry to fully recover and threatened our ability to serve U.S. national security and critical infrastructure needs. We're grateful when President Trump acted in March 2018 to level the playing field by reducing unfairly dumped steel imports by imposing tariffs and other measures as he had promised. Section 232 measures have been instrumental in reducing steel imports' share of the U.S. market to only 20%, down from over 33% foreign share in the first half of 2017, without harming U.S. economic growth or downstream industries. Together with increased steel demand, the 232 tariffs are contributing to increased U.S. production and capacity utilization, although these have yet to reach pre-recession levels. We urge Congress in efforts to continue support for the Section 232 program because there is still much to be done to ensure a sustainable future for the U.S. steel industry. While subsidized capacity expansion by China's state-dominated steel industry was a principal cause of the steel market's disruptions of the last decade, other exporters such as Vietnam and Turkey were also penetrating the U.S. market with unfairly traded steel. Strong trade rules and enforcement are needed to ensure free and fair trade going forward. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement is a much-needed update to the rules for free trade in North America, and we strongly support passage of the agreement by Congress. USMCA will serve as a model for new trade agreement rules, including rules of origin for autos and other steel-intensive products that encourage North American steel use and deter offshore free riders. We're also encouraged that USMCA includes prohibitions on subsidies to state-owned enterprises, disciplines on currency manipulation, and enhanced customs and enforcement cooperation with Canada and Mexico. Anti-dumping and countervailing remedies to address injurious imports remain critical to domestic steel producers, and nothing in the USMCA will undermine our ability to obtain this important relief in the future. Now that the USMCA has been signed, SMA supports a negotiated solution that will remove the Section 232 steel tariffs against both Canada and Mexico and those countries' countermeasures. Even modest changes in the balance of unfairly traded imports and domestic supply could throw the market back into uncertainty and undermine the industry's recovery. CMC agrees with Ambassador Lighthizer recent remarks before the Senate Finance Committee that a quota consistent with historic levels is an appropriate way to resolve any USMCA concerns while maintaining the benefits of the 232 program to the U.S. steel industry. Any agreement should also ensure that Canada and Mexico are not used as platforms to transship and displace steel into the United States from outside of North America. As I noted, American steelmakers are responding to the administration's action in the Section 232 program to invest in the future of steelmaking in the United States. Over $10 billion in new steel investments have been announced since January of 2017. Besides leveling the trade playing field, there are two other areas where Congress can act to create conditions under which the industry can thrive: infrastructure and workforce development. Steelmaking jobs of today are technology-driven and require advanced training beyond high school. Employers are finding it increasingly more difficult to fill jobs in highly skilled positions such as electrical technicians, welders, and maintenance technicians. SMA members are partnering to address this challenge by sponsoring local process technology courses and associate degree programs. For example, CMC helped develop and launch the Engineering Technology Program at Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. We helped fund the program, sponsored internships, donated equipment, and we proudly hired several qualified candidates. We respectfully urge members of the Steel Caucus to support bipartisan legislation to promote advanced technical and vocational training at the community college level. I know that many members of this caucus support passage of a strong U.S. infrastructure bill in the 116th Congress. SMA supports the Bipartisan Move America Act, sponsored by Representatives Earl Blumenauer and Jackie Walorski. A strong federal role in any infrastructure package will not only serve all Americans who use our infrastructure in the 21st century, but will also increase steel demand, supporting the domestic steel industry and our workers. Thank you for your attention and your bipartisan leadership to support American steelmakers.
Thank you, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Ferrata.
Good morning, Chairman Lamb, Vice Chairman Boston Crawford, and the distinguished members of the Congressional Steel Caucus. My name is Tony Ferrata, and I'm the Vice President of Finance for Zekelman Industries. Zekelman Industries is the largest producer of steel pipe and tube products in North America, and there's more than 2,000 employees employed in facilities in Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Our company is proud to be part of these communities and pleased to have a facility in Representative Crawford's district. This morning I speak on behalf of not only Zekelman, but also the Committee on Pipe and Tube Imports, an association comprised of the nation's leading producers of an array of carbon and stainless steel pipe and tube fittings and products. CPTI members, companies are located across the country in 33 states and 98 congressional districts, and today employ over 37,000 employees. These companies manufacture a variety of carbon and stainless steel tube products which are used in our agricultural, automotive, construction, defense, energy, and transportation sector. Equally important to our industry's economic well-being is the health of the domestic steel industry, which we rely on. We source flat-rolled steel and long products to manufacture our welded and seamless pipe and tube products. Last year, I joined other leaders from the industry to thank the caucus for their unwavering support of the Steel Section 232 investigation and remedy announced on March 8th, 2018. I can say without any hesitation that the proactive steps taken by the administration to provide relief to our industry and its workers has resulted in an economic turnaround and recovery and progress for the industry and its workers. For example, at our company, we provide an incentive bonus upon the enactment of the 232 for all our employees, and again this year we did the same and brought back workers to our plants as we restored shifts and announced new investments in our production facilities. The Steel Section 232 remedy includes a 25% tariff on steel imports from the majority of steel-producing countries, and annual quotas administered on a quarterly basis with Argentina, Brazil, and Korea. These remedies have proved to be very effective in successfully pushing back imports. But the reality is that this agenda needs to reach further, as we need to continue down the path of quotas to stabilize this industry long-term. We also recognize that negotiations continue with Canada and Mexico to reach an agreement on an alternative remedy that would ensure tariff-free movement of steel across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico borders. We look forward to the successful conclusion of this negotiation. Caucus members will recall that pipe and tube imports in recent years were off the charts. The impact of these imports resulted in temporary idling of plants, reduction in workforce, and financial losses for the industry. In fact, prior to the announcement of the 232 remedy, overall import penetration reached historical highs. In 2017, pipe and tube imports were 63% of the market and fell by 1.1 million tons in 2018, while still taking more than half of our market. I'm confident when I say that the industry is in a better place now than before, but I have to reiterate that our industry is still not out of the woods. There is still the need to keep the 232 remedy in place. You may ask me to allow to explain. First, we all know that steel is a cyclical industry and global trade patterns shift to meet demand. The industry is at a half point in its marathon against imports, and we remain concerned that many bad actors are engaged in practices to misclassify product to evade payment of the 232 duties. Our industry has carefully documented this activity and has notified the Customs Service about these practices. Customs has acted quickly, and I believe they are using all of their tools to ensure that the 232 duties and tariffs are enforced. Our industry would also like to commend the Commerce Department for their efforts on the implementation of the 232 program. Second, we believe that it's important that the 232 remain in place until a significant reduction in subsidized worldwide overcapacity is achieved. Even with the 25% duties in place, we see Chinese, Indian, Turkish, Iranian steel essentially being laundered to change it to pipe in countries like Vietnam, Oman, and the UAE, and being imported here at below our cost. As the caucus begins its work on framing legislation priorities in the 116th Congress, we encourage members to explore policies that will allow the industry to expand and serve demands for the steel products in this country, such as the infrastructure we've discussed today already. Whether it's pipe used to transport oil and gas, or structural tubing being used in construction of a skyscraper, our products are needed here as we rebuild this country. In addition to our quality products, our companies provide good wage jobs for thousands of employees who have benefited from job training programs which have allowed them to advance in the industry. Of course, our industry's continued success relies on our ability to compete on a level playing field. If trade is not conducted fairly, our industry will not be able to continue to compete in this marketplace. The CPTI also supports the framework of the principles established in the USMCA. In particular, we believe that the framework includes important country of origin provisions, particularly for auto and auto parts, which will result in economic benefits for the domestic industry. We also understand that the three countries agreed to enhance their customs enforcement tools to combat transshipment of imports through their countries. Both countries have been important trading partners for the U.S. Canada is the largest export market for U.S. steel and pipe and tube products, and we are hopeful that more of our products will be able to serve the Mexican market in the future. We are anxious to learn more about the timeline for congressional review and ratification and look forward to working with Congress on this matter. The CPTI will assemble in Washington, D.C. on May 16, 2019 to share our views on the issues of importance to the industry with our congressional delegation. Our message, members, is simple. ensure that trade is conducted fairly, and keep the Section 232 program in place. We will ask Congress to support legislation that will strengthen the trade laws, support new infrastructure development legislation, including the reauthorization of the Pipes Act, support policies to enhance the nation's energy grid, and ongoing support of legislation to address an end to customs fraud, circumvention, and evasion. The association also supports a robust fiscal year 2020 appropriations package that provides necessary resources for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, Department of Commerce, USTC, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Steel Caucus has provided outstanding leadership in Congress for many years, and we thank you for your support, engagement, and leadership on issues that are critical to the country's steel industry, its workers, and its communities. We look forward to working with the caucus this year. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now begin with our questions, and we are fortunate to be joined by several members, including some new members. So I'm just going to ask one question and then yield the rest of my time to make sure we have enough to get everybody in. President Gerard, you talked about how despite the imposition of 232, the Chinese had historically high production as recently as October. So that tells me that overcapacity is getting worse instead of better, and we really maybe just be at the beginning of what we need to do to address this problem. So can you take that on in a little more detail and let us know what you think may be causing that, or what else we can do about it?
Sure. Thank you. It's a good question. It allows me to reflect a bit. At its peak, America made about 150 million tons of steel. In our last round of steel crisis, steel industry was fighting for its very survival. And the reality is that our steel production went down to 85 million tons. During that same period of time, from about 2003 to 2016 or 17, in that range, the Chinese went from about 400 million tons to almost 1 billion. If you look at how much of that they could consume in their own market, depending on which economist you're listening to, they can probably consume about 600 to 700 million tons. And the key is capacity. They have the capacity to generate that. And obviously the concern of our union, and should be the concern of everyone on the caucus, if the economy slows in China to the point where they want to dominate the world, they can crush the steel industry anywhere that they're allowed to get into. They're sitting with more tons than the Canadian and American steel and the Mexican steel industry make together as their excess capacity. So there's a number of things that can be done legislatively beyond the 232. And we talked about on the demand side really accelerating the infrastructure program. But also on the defensive side, why does China get 40% of its waivers? What are we giving them a gift for? If you go through the countries that cheat, Turkey, Vietnam, Russia, China, they're getting more waivers than the countries that don't cheat. So that there's an important position. And everything that has to be used, we need to defend the melted and poured. I don't know how many times we've been in how many hearings where someone from the import industry, the folks that want to import slabs and finished steel, they want to move away from the melted and poured. Melted and poured is a very important segment of keeping the American and North American steel industry vibrant. Once we give that up, the slabs will come in from everywhere and anywhere. And so that we've had that fight at almost every year, trying to keep that piece on, so that and then let me just say this, the ability of the steel industry in the three countries that we're talking about at the moment is one where they play by the rules. And it's one where I know from the experience with our members in Canada, the legislation has been brought forward against countervailing, circumvention, against stronger enforcement, and also against transshipments. so that if we're gonna try to defend the North American industry, in particular the US industry at this time, we have to prevent transshipments, we have to prevent circumvention, and that takes you back to the melted and poured. So that I think that there's a, say this with all due respect, there's a lot of work that's been done by the Congressional Steel Caucus, but your work's not done yet.
We agree there. I will yield to Mr. Crawford for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ferriola, you referenced the significant investments, $3.5 billion, if memory serves, that your company's making at your U.S. plants, and one of them including in my district. Can you tell us which policies we can be pursuing here in Congress and with the administration that would support those efforts and help sustain a strong business environment where you can grow and prosper over time?
Thank you. Very good question. The biggest issue, of course, is creating a level playing field for us to compete upon. You've heard me say many times that the American steel industry can compete against any country if we have a level playing field to compete upon. You've been very active in helping us achieve that, and we've been investing as a result of that. Nucor, you mentioned $3.5 billion over the last several years, and just remember what that does in terms of job creation. What can you do to continue to help us ensure that we have that level playing field going forward? There are still some issues that need to be resolved. There are some current cases before the ITC that are very important. One is on large diameter welded pipe. That's still up in the air. The second one would be on fabricated steel, structural steel, which is still being in the process of being heard now. So I would suggest and urge you to continue to create a level playing field by making sure that these cases are heard and resolved fairly. And also, several people have mentioned circumvention, and that's a concern for us also. There's many ways that these countries that have been cheating continue to cheat. So strengthen the circumvention policies, make sure that there's enough money to make sure that this is not happening. And finally, I would say, again, mentioned by several of my teammates here, infrastructure. That is so important, not only to the economy, but clearly to steel manufacturing. Our country cannot have a strong economy if it does not have strong infrastructure. That's important not only for the economy, frankly, also for our national security. So those would be the things that I would mention that I would ask the committee to continue to work on to ensure long-term sustainability for our industry and for Nucor to be able to continue to invest.
Mr. Ferriola, you mentioned that the 232 remedies have been effective in pushing back steel imports. I know that as a result, your company that makes structural tube in my district, which had struggled in the past, at one time the mill was temporarily idled. I know that the mill is back up and running. I wanted to ask if you could tell us how the plant's doing today, if you expect any new investments and more capacity at that mill.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. We opened up the facility last year for the 232 announcement, taking a gamble to make sure that we felt it was coming. We felt that 232 would be example, so we went out on a limb and opened the facility back up. We hired our employees, and it's gone terrific. We're running as many tons as we did back in 2008 approximately, when we supplied many products for the border fence job back 10, 11 years ago. So we're back up to that capacity. We're still looking to hire more employees. It's, I guess, a good problem to have for the employees of the state of Arkansas is that we're struggling to get enough employees to fill our capacity needs, and I'm sure some of our fellow neighbors in that area are also working diligently to hire more employees. So from our standpoint, it's been great at that facility along with all of our other facilities across the country. We're still looking to fill many positions across all of our facilities, as well as adding shifts in various plants.
Thank you. Just real quick, finally, Ms. Smith, since the announcement of 232 remedy, EAF steelmaking seems to become more financially sound, and you referenced that in your comments. How long do you think 232 remedies need to be in effect to allow domestic steelmakers an opportunity to compete in the global market?
Well, excuse me, certainly I think they've just begun to do their work, and I think it really goes back to a lot of the comments President Gerard talked about. It's really getting the excess global capacity under control. And clearly China continues to add capacity, so the measures thus far have not deterred the excess capacity. And, you know, China's not the only country. In the products that we produce, Turkey is the major offender, and they have utilized every tricky scheme to bring product into this country, manipulate documentation. You can go on and on, and dumping it in the U.S. at prices well below what we can produce it for here. It boggles my mind. You know, we have everything we need to be the lowest cost producers of steel in the United States. First of all, as I indicated, Marshall Metals has leading technology. 2 brand new state-of-the-art steel-making operations here in the United States. We have the raw material, scrap. We have low energy. We have a great workforce, which in some cases is 10 times more productive than many of these countries that we're talking about. And we have a great infrastructure, and we're close to get it to our customer, and we're close to our customers. So there's no way a country can buy raw material in the U.S., freight it over to Turkey, convert it, freight it back, bring it inland, dump the price, and make money. It's not possible. So that's the clearest evidence in my mind that they're cheaters. You can use whatever words you want to use. They're circumventing, they're cheating, they're exploiting this free and open economy, and it needs to stop. We have great workers doing honorable work and proud work for this country. And if we lose this manufacturing base, then what?
Thank you. Yield back. Very well said. Thank you very much. And recognize now Mr. Boss for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question, Mr. Burke, you know, when it comes to government support and subsidies, most attention is focused on the cheaters that we know, okay? Those non-market economies, Chinese, Vietnam, Russia, Turkey, the list goes on and on. And when we're trying to look in all directions, there's something going on right now that I want to kind of ask you on what the impact might be. Canada has announced a multi-billion-dollar subsidy program for its steel industry. What will that do to the U.S. steel industry, do you think?
That's a great question, and obviously it's not good for the U.S. steel industry. And this goes back to the basic issue about 232 really has to apply everywhere or it applies nowhere. Trying to find out where the steel ends up and where it gets funneled through is difficult, whether it comes through the southern border or the northern border, that's an issue. And if we have countries that subsidize steel, and just Canada, for example, actually the imports into the United States increased 200 basis points from, I think it was 16.5% to 18.5% during the course of the 232. So clearly, there are things going on, we don't fully understand it, but make no question about it, the really bad actor is China, but other countries are complicit, knowingly or unknowingly. So oftentimes people say, build a coalition, get everybody together. It has not worked for decades. So you need a little bit of a carrot, a little bit of a stick, and this is what the 232 does. It's bringing people together to actually come up with a solution. Because if the subsidies continue to pay through the tariffs, like we're seeing that, you think about right now when with the steel prices now are not that much higher than the average over the last 10 years. And if you go back to 15 and 16, they're about half the price of what they were now. And it's interesting that we have some customers that are concerned about what the prices are now, but they reflect poorly on what happened in 15 and 16. And so now what we're getting is a level playing field. We're actually forcing people to the table to have the discussion so we can get the NAFTA 2.0 USMCA that will be right and just with strong enforcement to make sure that we're doing the right thing for national security here in the United States. But be clear, China is the ultimate bad actor because of the excess capacity. But if we don't take it on everywhere, we're not going to take it on anywhere.
I want to take a moment to correct what David said. The fact of the matter is Canada, we have 200,000 members in Canada. We have members at every steel facility in Canada, and they're not getting subsidized by anybody. In fact, what they've done is put their own tariff on. And if you go back historically, and Dave wants to talk about history, go back historically, there's been balanced trade between the United States and Canada in steel. 1 year it's higher in the US because of the auto industry, another year it's higher in Canada, and it goes back and forth. And the reality is that Canada has a unique relationship with the US. We have a defense arrangement, that all of Canada's metal is available to America, and all of Canada's aluminum and steel is available to America in times of war and crisis if they need it. That's been in place since the 1940s and late 40s and early 50s.
Mr. Gerard,
So we have.
I'd like to reclaim my time if I can.
Okay, we have a disagreement.
I got a specific question for you.
We'll come back to you, yeah, thank you.
This question is actually for you.
Okay.
If Section 232, you know, it's about making the United States have a sufficient steel making capacity.
Right.
United States, how many members do you have making steel in the United States, and how many do you have in Canada?
Probably about, between 9 and 12,000 in Canada, members making steel currently.
How many in the United States?
Probably closer to 50,000 of our members.
That's my focus. Know that.
I understand.
And that should be this caucus's
Yeah,
focus.
and we have the same view because right now, there's more steel being imported to Canada from America.
And the concern that we have is that, look, we want to catch the cheaters, but we also want to make sure that our capacity is built to the point, and that's what 232 is, protect this nation. We want to work with our allies,
Yeah, I
and
understand
I'm
that.
all for that. But I want to let you know that the focus of this committee, I believe, should be our U.S. workers. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, sir. And now recognize the Honorable Mike Doyle from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Connor. Good to see everyone. I feel like we've been doing this for way too long. I was looking at Pete Visklosky and Marcy Capter, some of us that have been, the old battle horses that have been working. You know, just generally, I think, you know, Pete and Marcy will agree. I mean, we've testified, as you said, Leo, in front of the ITC more times than we can remember. And trade agreements are nice, but if there's not enforcement mechanisms, then they don't make much sense. And for years, many of us that represent steel producing areas were scratching our heads at some of these agreements. If you have to wait until you're harmed to bring a case, that just doesn't make much sense to me. Once you know someone's cheating, you should be able to bring a case so that you don't get harmed. But it never worked that way. And we saw the results of by the time we got relief sometimes, many of these places closed and they never reopened. So enforcement is important. I know we're looking at a new agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And those enforcement provisions are going to be equally important if this is going to be a meaningful agreement. David, I have to ask you on a local matter. There's great interest and concern in my district. The Clairton Coke Works sits right in the heart of my congressional district, and I know recently you had a fire there, and there's some concerns in the community and people in the county about that. We'd just like to get an update on what kind of progress you're making to get that back on track.
Well, thank you very much for that question, because you know, this was a horrific event for us at U.S. Steel at the Clairton facility in Pennsylvania. You know, sometimes bad things happen to good companies, and this happened on Christmas Eve, December 24th. And the good news is that our first responders, our firefighters at the facility responded quickly, put out the fire in a matter of hours. Nobody was injured, nobody was hurt. But the danger, and if you think about it, we talk about a control room this was in, it's actually the size of a football field. So this was a really big deal, and we actually couldn't get on physically in the site because of the danger that was there until January 8th. Once we were able to assess the damage, we made a commitment to be ready and get it back in place by May 15th, working tirelessly with the steel workers, with the trade unions, and we're happy to report that by April 15th, we'll have the process in place to be in normal operations. And we're monitoring and measuring every day, and so we're ahead of schedule. It was clearly a very bad thing that happened to our company. We're spending tens of millions of dollars to make sure that we make this thing right. We're on it, we got this, and we want to invest more in Pennsylvania, much more at this facility to make it the best steelmaking facility environmentally friendly, integrated mill on the planet. So there's a lot of work that has to still be done, but that's what we'd like to do to make this totally right and better.
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah, let me just say that with David and our union on this issue, we're attached at the hip. The fact of the matter is that prior to the fire, this was still the most environmentally sound coke battery in North America, if not the world. And with the investments they're making, it will become, again, the most environmentally sound coke facility in North America, if not the world. The other thing I want to comment about when you asked about trade cases, we've been involved in since 2012 in roughly 85 trade cases at the ITC. We won all or most of our award in all but 6 cases. And someone said to me once, well, why do you end up winning so many? I said, because they all cheat. All you gotta do is gather the facts and show up for the hearing and you win. The problem is, in order to meet, and this is where the law could, and you guys could help with the law, under the Trade Act, you've got to demonstrate injury. You lost profitability, you lost market share, laid off workers, you got to prove that you've been injured. Well, if you've lost productivity, you've lost wages, you've lost income, you've lost this, and then you go and get a case and you win, what did you really win? You won for the future, you still got your plants closed and people didn't make any money. So what we ought to have in trade law is if you know someone is cheating, you should be able to go without having to prove you've been destroyed.
I agree with that totally. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Bisklowski of Indiana.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. I have 5 minutes. I put my timer on. I have 7 points, so I'll be quick. One, I do think the chair and Mr. Gerard hit the nail on the head at the very beginning, and that is overcapacity. Ms. Smith mentioned Turkey, it's not just China. First question I have, just if any of you have an opinion, has any of the worldwide overcapacity been reduced over the last year and a half? Okay, you have answered my question because the 232s will not be there forever. So obviously, all of us have work to do to encourage the administration to make sure that happens. Secondly, and Mr. Verboda mentioned it, and I appreciate that, is we need to fund the agencies that support and protect us as far as the agency. Elections matter. The administration did the 232 investigation, but I would point out that for the ITC in fiscal year 18, $93.7 million were spent. For fiscal year 2020, the administration has asked that that be cut from 18 levels. In fact, the ITC needs $101 million for their additional responsibilities. I would suggest all of you, those who are interested, particularly talk to members in the House and Senate Appropriations Committee with jurisdiction, they need that money. In 18, the International Trade Administration received $495 million. This year for 2020, the administration had asked that that be cut to $471.1 million. Customs and Border Protection, someone mentioned that. In 2018, we were at $14 billion. The administration asked that that be cut to $12.5 billion. So I would ask that people be engaged. I'm not going to enter into international negotiations, but I must tell you, for all the times I've testified about Korean steel being dumped in the United States, they're exempted. In Canada, it's not. It is inexplicable to me. I would also, Mr. Brett, ask, is that 14% just the first year of that contract with the steel workers? Or is that over the 4 years?
It's over the 4 years.
I know, I'm drawing the question. The next comment, now I'm ready to shake hands with them on that. I've got 2 minutes and 32 seconds left here. On infrastructure, I think we all support it. I will not vote for an infrastructure bill. I will not go for one if we do not pay for it. I'm tired of cutting taxes and not investing in this country. We ought to do both. We ought to pay for this thing. The next point I would make, Mr. Gerard mentioned a toughening of NAFTA standards. I think Mr. Brett mentioned he supports continuation and the agreement. But Leo talked about the fact of concerns on circumvention. The issue, again, of melted and poured. Do any of you support tightening that particular rule in these NAFTA negotiations? I would just say, I gotta keep going, but everybody else, well, I see 3 people nodding yes. I see 5 people nodding yes. We're agreed on that. Okay, let's move on. The last
I like the way you
question
count.
for the last 1 minute 36 seconds. On the exclusion process, 50,000 have been applied for. 22,000, give or take, have been adjudicated, about 75% have been granted, 38,000 are left. How is that process working? Is it stopped up? Because we want to be fair. But it seems like it's a massive, cumbersome process. Anybody just want to take that for 1 minute?
I can tell you that, on behalf of a number of smaller steel companies, on behalf of some companies in other sectors, we've advocated for them to get a waiver. And it's tied up in the bureaucracy. And apparently, one of the things we were told is that the 35-day shutdown has created a huge backlog in the waiver system. I don't have any knowledge about that, but I do know this. 40% of the waivers have been granted to China. Other waivers have been granted to South Korea. We just won trade cases not that long ago against South Korea. Now we give them a damn waiver?
We know Rob simply about, we have a firm in Indiana. It is foreign owned. I don't remember ever testifying against this firm at the ITC, and I'm over there all the time. It is unionized. They're paying 25% a day. So I would hope the administration is discreet, not just ham-handed. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and Chair now recognizes Mr. Stauber from Minnesota for 5 minutes, and I'll just note, latest word is that we have him up until 10 o'clock, so we have a little more time than we thought we had. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm Pete Stauber from Minnesota 8, and I think the state of Minnesota, the 8th district, that puts 66% of the iron ore that makes the steel in this country should be considered a national security district. We have iron ore, copper, nickel, gold, platinum, palladium, zinc, titanium, and we're just opening the first copper nickel mine in the state of Minnesota. We talk about cheating. Those 232 tariffs gave families life on the Iron Range of Minnesota. And if you don't think it mattered, people coming up, tears in their eyes, were finally working. Taconite, timber, tourism, transportation, and shipping are the economic drivers in our district. The Iron Range, northern Minnesota matter. When we have those Lakers leaving the port of Duluth for southern ports to make the steel, to melt those taconite pellets down, that is economy. That is men and women, their jobs, good paying jobs. And I will say this, that to the senior members on this caucus, I am so proud to be here with you. The information you're sharing, we are going to bring it back, and we can work to make America steel the #1 product for this country. When I was on the campaign trail, I made sure we told people mining is our past, our present, and our future in northern Minnesota. If we don't have mining in northern Minnesota, we don't have an economy, and we have those minerals right there. We have the biggest iron ore mine in northern Minnesota. 66% of our steel comes out of those mines. And I've been to every one of them. You talk about making infrastructure packages out of America's steel. I want to share 2 things with you. I come out of St. Louis County, Minnesota as a county commissioner. We put in place every piece of steel that is used on every single project is made from America's steel. The only thing that's not made is the motor grader blades that come out of Canada, because we can't find an American manufacturer. Every bolt, every nut that puts a street sign up, highway sign, is made out of American steel. And I want to bring that to Congress. That's what I promised to northern Minnesota. And that's why I put a bill forth. We can talk about immigration, and we have different points, pro or con. But I want to share with you in the caucus, the American Workers for Security Act means that when that southern border is put up, every piece, every little ounce is made of American steel. We can debate about whether it's needed or not, but when it goes up, It's made from American hands, American made. Protect America. Mr. Gerard, with that perspective, what does that type of legislation do for the steel workers on big projects such as that and other infrastructure projects?
Let me congratulate you for doing that. There was, as you would well know, there was a campaign in Minnesota to ban mining. And the Steelworkers Union took up the challenge, and we created committees all over the state, and we said mining matters. You may have seen some of the ads, some of the work that we did. I come from a mining industry. My dad was a miner, my brother was a miner, my uncle was a miner. You can't make anything in the world unless you mine it. If you want to have wind turbines, you need copper. Copper doesn't grow on trees, you gotta go dig it up. If you want to have batteries, you gotta have nickel cadmium. Doesn't grow on trees, you gotta go dig it up. So as far as we're concerned, our union is a mining union. We believe in mining. We believe that mining is tied to steel making. You can't have infrastructure with steel if you don't have mining for iron ore. You don't have nickel for batteries and all that stuff. And I don't want to use everybody's time, but I'm with you, man.
That's awesome. I will just.
At least till election time.
Yeah. You know what, I'm not sure how to respond to that. I will say this though.
Sitting in the wrong spot.
I will say this, that you're from Canada, I played professional hockey, and I tell you what, there was many
Who did you play for?
Detroit. I can tell you there's many Canadians that made me look good, so it was just fine. I want to say that you talk about your industries and the steel. I want to be a part of this to fulfill the mission that is the right thing to do for this country. And we can build, and we have a lot of work to do, but I think the members of Congress that are sitting here in the Steel Caucus, we can do great things together and make sure that the steel is made here in America, keep the companies vibrant. And as you can see, I have a passion for northern Minnesota. And we matter up there. Yes, it's 71 below sometimes, but you know what? We're still in the mines mining iron ore.
And you dress for it.
We dress for it. It doesn't take long before you realize that if you don't dress for it, you're not going to last, right? But the miners and the steel workers we are proud, and it is an economic driver for us. And so I appreciate, and I want to offer my door is always open for learning more about the issues, but I'm passionate, and I thank each and everyone for being here. Mr. Gerard.
Let me just add that we're working very hard with you and others in Minnesota to get the permitting for that new nickel copper mine.
Well, it's
right now I think we're ready to go. I'm meeting with the leadership of that next week.
perfect. That's awesome. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. And now recognize Ms. Capter of Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I can figure out how to turn this on here. Is that the one? Oh, yeah, great. Okay, got all the buttons up here. Thank you all. Thank you all for surviving what this country's been through in your industry, and for keeping us defense ready despite all of the challenges, and for your continued refinement of product. And for all those whose hands make that possible and whose leadership makes that possible. I have a few questions. I represent Northern Ohio, Cleveland to Toledo, probably one of the largest manufacturing platforms in the country. And yesterday, Ohio State University came out with a report that basically indicated that the tariffs and everything we've been doing hasn't made any difference in Ohio. And several of the panelists today represent companies that operate in Northern Ohio. And so my question would be, for companies like Republic, U.S. Steel, I'm not sure about ArcelorMittal in Cleveland, I don't know those numbers, but I can guarantee you in Lorain, Ohio, there have been no added jobs as a result of these tariffs. So my question is, why not? Why not Ohio? Lordstown just announced closure, and that is going to affect us very, very heavily. Thank goodness Cleveland Cliffs is investing nearly $1 billion at Toledo to take some of the mined ore from Minnesota and transform it for the steel industry, and that is a welcome investment at Toledo. So my first question is, why not Ohio? What's the speed bump there? Number two, in terms of NAFTA, President Gerard, you talked about in your testimony, and I thank you for this, the importance of certain provisions in NAFTA 2.0 for melted and poured, a melted and poured standard. My question goes to the workers. What do the workers in Mexico and some of our competitors make? Benefits, as well as wages. In China, you talked about Korea, South Korea, Russia, Turkey. Where's that standard? Where's the workers' standard in the, how in heaven's name, unless they're working for the same wages and benefits as our workers are, how do we get a standard in NAFTA that's a continental standard and sets us on a different path as we move forward, so we don't continue to outsource everything because of those health and benefit requirements? How would, and then number three, the head of one of the major automotive firms for North America said to me the most important thing I could do for him was to cut his energy costs by 1/3. I happen to have another position in this Congress, thank goodness, that deals with energy, and I want to use it fiercely to help manufacturing. So for each of the companies that are present, what can we do to help you on your energy costs?
Well, let me say that your questions about Mexico. I have information on just two companies. One is a consumer of steel to make steel belted tires. They're from Ohio. The average wage of one of our workers that we represent at that tire plant is somewhere around $29 an hour plus benefits, which can keep you at a decent standard of living. In Mexico, they just opened that tire plant. The average wage is $1.49. Another one that I got.
President Gerard, could I ask you, have you heard in any of the NAFTA 2 discussions about a standard, a living standard, a working standard? Has that come up in any comprehensive way continentally?
The only thing I could add constructively to that is that USTR Lighthizer has been trying to negotiate a higher wage for certain jobs, and they've identified certain triggers that could get you to a $16 an hour job, getting a preferential export-import provision. But you got to figure that out with a company I'll use as an example, and we don't represent anybody there. Mondeleza. Mondeleza makes Oreo cookies. They moved from Ohio to Mexico. 1,200 jobs were lost in Ohio. I was with the president of that union earlier this week. The wages at Mondeleza in Mexico for an entry level is 97 cents an hour. For a middle tech, it's $1.29 an hour. For a senior tech, it's $1.49 an hour. So that's what I know we're up against, and there's no, and I'm pretty sure that John knows about the steel industry in Mexico, and the steel industry in Mexico and the mining industry in Mexico are probably the higher paid industries in the country. And so that's what's going on. There's nothing really going on in the NAFTA 0.20 that's going to say we've got a standard across the board.
Well, then it won't get my support.
We've taken a position that the labor movement, we're not going to support any deal that hasn't got strong enforcement of labor laws in Mexico, and we're waiting for that.
That's what's really going on with these trade deals. It's an open door to a low-wage economy. We haven't faced it in my entire career in this Congress. I believe your industry should help lead that fight, or we're going to continue to have a diminishment in the standard of living in this country, and look what's going on from coast to coast. Pay attention. This is really serious stuff. It has to do with the ability to live and survive and not be constantly in debt. The country's in huge debt. And these trade deals have really harmed us. We haven't had a year of trade balance in my entire career in the Congress. It's only gotten worse. And we are strung out there. We are leveraged really high. And your leaders in industry and labor, this is really important. A NAFTA deal could be a renegotiated NAFTA deal could be path-breaking for the 21st century. Are we going to continue to think 20th century, or are we going to do something really transformative? We have to really. Prior generations in our country did that. They created programs like Social Security I'm not saying we should use that model, but the point is, they thought big because we had to. And what we're facing now with low-wage China, low-wage Turkey or wherever, Russia, and certainly on our own continent, we have to have provisions that deal with sustainable living for people who work. I wouldn't want to be a miner. Thank God we have people who are able to do that in our country. That is one dangerous, dirty job. And we need it. We need Americans who work hard, but they need to be, people everywhere need to be rewarded for their hard work. So I just encourage you to be leaders on in the NAFTA discussions that recognize, and if you haven't traveled to the small little towns in Mexico where these individuals live who work in some of these sweatshops, do it. Do yourself a favor. Go see it. See if you can sleep at night. I can't. It's inhuman. And somebody has to be a voice for that. I haven't found a government in Mexico yet that's willing to speak for their own people. So maybe we have to. I think the Canadians would, I think we would. I think we need to lift people's hopes because of the hard work that they do, both in industry and agriculture on this continent. We're not doing it. History will judge us very harshly. Thank you for listening to that lecture. Why haven't jobs in steel in Ohio ticked up? Anybody want to comment? U.S. Steel?
If I may, I'll start by, you asked the question whether or not we're investing. Any steel companies are investing in Ohio.
Yes.
Nucor has. We've invested $85 million in our Marion, Ohio facility, and that will create between direct and indirect jobs somewhere between 80 and 100 good-paying direct and indirect jobs. So we're proud to say that we've done it. Marion, Ohio. Our Marion, Ohio facility has been an excellent facility. It's you mentioned hardworking Americans. I can tell you, visiting that facility, you will see hardworking American steel workers.
Thank you very much for that investment in Lorain, Ohio. Anyone want to comment on Lorain, Ohio, U.S. Steel? Is there some reason that plant is mothballed?
You may have to move to the next questioner, so if we could just keep the answer short, go ahead.
Obviously, I'm not going to speak for U.S. Steel, but I certainly want to highlight that we have and continue to invest in our plant in Cleveland, which we always value your support. Not only did we make an investment in our galvanized line, which is going to help advance high-strength steels, and you talk about addressing energy, that will help too. You know, it's going to help on emissions. This year, we're going to invest nearly $40 million on a powerhouse at Cleveland to actually take down the cost of our energy there. And you know, I studied a little bit of economics when I was younger. I would argue with those people at Ohio State, and you know, I'd ask them to go to our plant in Cleveland and ask them if it hasn't mattered. You know, but it's not so long ago those folks were without a job. Right? You know, that was, you know, in this century when that plant was shut down. So those people certainly value what we've done and certainly what you've done, and really they're amongst the most productive workforce. And it's because they're thankful for this opportunity.
Okay, and with that, we recognize Ms. Kelly from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry I missed your opening statements, but I had another meeting. Mr. Ferriola, I just wanted to, if I could jump off the stage and hug you, I would, because I know how, I know how important Nucor Steel has been to my district, and I really appreciate all the investment that you guys have done. And just to give a shout out, we love the lady sitting behind you. She's absolutely wonderful. I was wondering, because I hear this a lot, that even though you're doing investments, and some other people are too, especially in that Kankakee, more rural area, it is hard to find help. And maybe any of you can answer this, but are you finding that even though there are jobs, it's hard to fill the jobs?
You know, in the steel industry, as we become more and more modern, and we are just investing $180 million in that Kankakee facility, we're really excited about that. It does become more challenging, but I think it's incumbent upon the companies in the industry to take it upon themselves to deal with that issue. We certainly work with government agencies to improve the education process, but at Nucor, we take that upon ourselves, and we have developed a program we call Steel University. It's located at our facility in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. where we work with a local community college to develop an educational agenda that specifically deals with the skills that are needed in the steel industry today. The way that it works is we take young men and women out of high school, they enter into the community college, they work a half a day in our plant, and they go to school for a half a day, with Nucor picking up the educational costs as well as the living costs, and at the same time paying a salary to them so they can go through the 3 years. So that's one of the ways that we're addressing this issue, and I would encourage companies like Nucor to continue doing that, because there is a great demand and it is becoming harder to find workers for more modern technology.
And also, for any of you, where does or does it artificial intelligence fit into that?
You know, artificial intelligence plays a major role in improving the quality of the steel that's produced in our factories. And we talked a lot about American steel, American steel workers, American steel companies versus the others in the world. I would challenge any company outside of the United States to match the technological advancements that we have made in steel making in the United States. You mentioned artificial intelligence. That plays a major role at Nucor. I know for a fact it plays a major role at all of our competitors, as it should. So that's one area where when you talk about the future, when you talk about trade and making sure that we get a level playing field to compete upon, that enables us to continue to invest in those modern techniques that continue to grow and improve our steel.
Let me add to what John just said, that more than 25 years ago, the leadership of our union had a vision, and in every major workplace represented by our members, we have the Institute for Career Development. It's a voluntary thing where workers can advance, get their training, get a whole bunch of skills inside and outside the facility. But the thing that people don't understand that haven't been in a modern steel mill, if you go into what we call the pulpit where the operator works, half a dozen screens, that operator, by the time he or she becomes proficient, they've had more training than an airline pilot. These are sophisticated, scientifically designed jobs. If you drive by a steel yard and you see all the rolls of steel out there, they all look the same, but they're not. Every one of them has been scientifically designed and engineered to meet a specific customer need. That doesn't happen without a lot of training, a lot of experience, and I can brag a little bit about our industry working with our employers. We work together to make sure that our people are getting the best training and can make the best product. Right, David?
If I might add, we also have a small operation in the Kankakee area. But in my opening remarks, I mentioned with regard to training that we have a partnership with Texas State University. That's just one example of a partnership to help develop and train steelworkers of the future. We have our own internal apprentice programs and facilities within our operations where we bring young high school graduates in and train them with all the skills as described here. When we built our facility in Durant, Oklahoma, which had an unemployment rate of 13% at the time that we selected the site, I'm proud to say today it's down at the national average. We partnered with the Choctaw Nation, and they were very, very helpful in working with us to train the local workforce to move them from entertainment jobs to these high-quality steelmaking jobs. So the industry is doing a lot in terms of trying to train and prepare the workers for the future, but any legislative help would also be welcome.
There's that one more question. When you win against the cheaters, I know you said that sometimes the plant is already closed and you've lost out already, but when you win against the cheaters and the plant is not closed, this may be a dumb question, but when you get money back, do you get your legal costs covered, or that's like how much do you spend in that?
That's not a dumb question. It should be, okay, because there should be some way to recoup the tremendous amount of time and cost and effort that goes into these cases. And I would just point out that, you know, that's one of the reasons why we were so excited about finding a comprehensive trade remedy issue, because You win a case against South Korea, the problem becomes Vietnam. You win it against Vietnam, it becomes Cambodia, and it's just, we call it a whack-a-mole. And the amount of money that's spent and frankly wasted, because we could be putting that money into growing our businesses, providing more employment for American workers, frankly, it's sinful.
Well, that's something I think.
Pete might remember this. Everybody remember the Byrd bill? The Byrd bill by Senator Byrd passed so that we could recoup some of our losses and some of our investment and some of what we had to do to win the case. I'm a bit embarrassed to say that Congress took that out, so they felt they should punish American companies by not letting us recoup what we've lost because of cheaters. And that, I lose track of time, Pete, that's about 10 years ago.
Well, I have to talk to Pete about history, but I think we should put that in. Thank you.
Thank you, and finally recognize Mr. Gibbs for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and for my colleague that left here from northern Minnesota, I just want to concur that we want to make sure that iron ore does get down to the receiving ports of Ohio, from Ohio, and the Sioux Locks function of the Great Lakes Coalition members make sure that we're working at the core of that, and specifically my work I've done to make sure that the dredging in Cleveland keeps happening, so we want to make sure that ore gets to our 2 blast furnaces, Arsenalville, and it's great to see that the investment and the increase there that Mr. Brett's doing there in Cleveland, and the Shelby operations too, for the tubular plant. I'm sorry, I apologize, I wasn't here for your opening statements, this list might have been already covered in our commitment, but when we talk China, my understanding China has probably more than 50% of the world's capacity, steel production capacity. You're shaking your head, so I think that's right, right? And then my understanding is that most of the Chinese steel operations are government owned. That's correct. I think it's 18 out of 19 is that I actually heard, if it's true or not. And that when I did come in this morning, I heard a comment about the subsidization. It's also my understanding that even with the tariffs going up, the Chinese government is subsidizing money back to their government-run operations, so they're keeping them whole. I see a head shaking, so that's another correct issue. So I'm trying to understand, you know, in a free market economy, you know, when we have overcapacity, at some point that overcapacity diminishes or disappears. Now the situation with China, how's that capacity, how's that adjustment ever been made, or how's that get addressed in a China-U.S. traded deal? I mean, I'm struggling how we come to some fruition on a deal, which we seem to hear that maybe there's something gonna happen. But how's this place in with China? So I'm gonna want to comment on my thoughts about trying to go here, trying to understand long term, how's this issue get addressed? Or maybe long term, the technology gets so good that they get priced out of the market, but so I don't even want to address what I'm trying to raise here.
Yeah, I'd just say, the way I think of it is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The way, you know, the China is the issue. You think about it, I always say they're neither blessed nor handicapped with Western style ethics, so they think completely differently. And with the 232, we have it in place in the U.S., but it gets back to the kind of a key point. It really has to be applied everywhere. We also have operations in Europe, and we're seeing the price pressure now in Europe. The input costs are up and the prices are down, so there's a margin squeeze in Europe because it's finding its way into Europe because they have not done a very good job on their borders. This gets back to this kind of whack-a-mole thing that John mentioned earlier. They find their way through this process because they have to do something with their excess capacity. And if you think of China, it is run by the country, and they have about, you know, you could argue 2,000 dysfunctional managers where they're told you will take capacity out, and they take out the old capacity and then add in the new capacity. And because they're able to find ways elsewhere, because it's not everywhere, we don't have this coalition to win across the world, and we've been trying to create the coalition passively over the last many decades. We're finally using a carrot and a stick to get everybody to the table, and I do believe it will take time to get everybody there. Our partners in Europe must come to the table too, but we can't blink here because if we don't take the leadership role and show people how this works, it won't happen in Europe. They're slower to respond than what we are. we're after this, we're on it, and the President's 232 is making a very real difference here in the United States. But other parts of the world will feel this pain for a while, like our Slovakian organization is feeling the pain right now. Over time, though, they will do the same thing because it's the right thing to do. You have to push the problem back to the source, and the source is China. But until we have the coalition of wanting to win, it won't happen. It's going to take years to actually fix this problem.
You know, if I could just add to that, first of all, congratulations, you had all of the facts correct. It's somewhere about 90% of the steel that's produced in China that is state-owned, okay, which in of itself is a major issue. But you asked what can be done about it. And at the end of the day, it has to become a free market economy in China. That's what they promised to do when they applied to the WTO so many years ago. They are still trying to get approval to be under the rules of the WTO. It shouldn't happen. It's not a free market economy. In a true global free market economy, the most efficient place to produce a product is where the product should be made. We've heard so many people testify about the U.S. because of the energy, because of the raw materials, because of the market. This is the logical place to make steel. And frankly, you know, we talked a lot about mining today. Think about where China has to get its raw materials. They bring it from half the globe away. Then they produce the steel in heavily polluting mills, and then emit all of the carbon to move it back across, you know, 10,000 miles to the market in the United States. In addition to being a true economic issue, people need to consider the environmental impacts on the globe of making steel in China versus here in the United States. That's something that people should begin to take a hard look at.
To add on to John's point, with all the discussions going on recently about environmental issues, somebody ought to drop the hammer on the Chinese. For every ton of steel that they produce anywhere from 3 to 5 million more tons of carbon than an American mill or a North American mill. And we keep giving them, I don't understand this, we keep giving them an open door to do whatever they want, then we respond after we've been hurt. I don't know if any of you watch 60 Minutes. I'm just going to say this very briefly. A couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes was a 20-minute segment on the making of Chinese electric cars. 30 companies are fully funded by the Chinese government. And then after 5 years, they're going to conduct them down to 10, then down to 3. And they're doing it all with government money. The only reason I raise it is that's the demand side. We need a demand side in the economy so that we can produce 150 million tons like we used to, not 85. And if we don't create demand, so they're stealing not only our jobs, they're stealing our demand, and they're exporting unemployment to us.
Thanks for your response. I think, you know, we got to be tough with the Chinese because they don't play fair, and we knew that. And I'm just curious, you know, it's interesting how you said how Europe figures into this, and that's an interesting scenario, so I appreciate that. So I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would like to recognize Vice Chairman Mr. Voss for an additional round of questioning.
Just real quick, I know we're drawing short on time, but you know, I wanted to let, you all probably know this, but we have certain colleagues of ours that have tried in legislation that's out there to change 232 right now. Right now, one of the bills is asking for 232 investigation to move from the Commerce Department to the Department of Defense. Why do you think it should stay with the Commerce Department? Any of you?
Well, it is, definitely it is a military issue. National defense is important, okay? But it goes beyond that. Congress is responsible for making sure that we have a sustainable economy in the United States. You cannot have a strong military. You cannot have a strong national defense if you do not have a strong economy. So that's why I feel that it should stay exactly where it is today, and that they should, I like Dave's term of not blinking. This is a time when there's going to be a lot of pressure to blink. But I urge everyone in Congress to stay strong, don't blink.
My comment about it is very brief. Senator Toomey's trying to roll back time. And the reality is that I would hate to have to appear before Congress in order to get a trade remedy. We've got an ITC that functions half of what it could do, and we should make sure we fund it and give it the changes in trade law so that we can get a hearing before we get injured.
I would just further add, and I agree 100% with John, you cannot have a strong military without a strong economy. And many of us here produce products that are for military applications. At Commercial Metals, we produce armor plate that goes in all of the military vehicles that protect our soldiers. That's a very small part of our business. We could not be a viable company and invest in the technology needed to make that specialized armor plate if we didn't have our other base business, which is basically concrete reinforcing steel. And if we don't have a strong infrastructure, whether it's power or water or roads, then our economy is going to erode over time. So I think it would be a huge mistake to shift the responsibility to the Department of Defense.
Thank you. And just something real quick for the record. You know, we had several of our colleagues comment on the USMC tariff agreement, and when, none of us have read it yet. We hear rumors and stuff like that. And under that scenario, I will say this, some of the things I'm hearing is there are certain labor standards that will be required for Mexico, and I think that's appropriate that we do that. So I know there was a lot of things set up here today, but I do thank everybody, and I yield back.
Okay, and I just want to end by saying one more time, thank you for your time, for your attention, for your hard work on these issues. They certainly have meant a lot to educating me as to what goes on, and we will continue working together as the year.
I have to end on a bad note, but I think your pen is made in China.
A true skunk at the garden party, as promised.